This is our follow-up to Family Matters. We're doing a conference on family, and the whole goal is to talk about issues that we have experienced as parents. For me, I've invited a panelist of people from Atlanta as well as people from Maryland. We have two churches, two locations, and these are people who, when they came to the church, their kids were either 1 year old or they were 0, and their kids were born and raised in this church. And so we got to get an opportunity to, Jill, to experience. We never thought that we would be here, that we got an opportunity to experience a family raising their children, and we had to begin to teach on how to raise your child in the proper environment, and just to see the fruit of this. This is Ed and Ty. Is there music that goes with this? All right. Well, let's go back because I want to watch Ed's face again. Look at that look. That's the elder of the church, and that's the little angel that's going to save his life, and they don't know each other. Play. Boom, stop. He does not know he's going to become so handsome and she's going to be so beautiful. But that's during the time when he was getting delivered from anger. Keep going. Now look at the family that he has. Now, Ed, for those who don't know, Ed and Taya, they have a daughter, Eden, and who is he? Big Evan. What is he? Evan. And they both got full scholarships to certain places. But I don't want to get into just to their accolades. These people were spiritual when they raised their children. They did the best they knew how to do. And he did a great job. And this man, as you will hear, had some issues. And his wife was trying to work with him. But they did a great job. Next, please. And I can't talk about everybody like this. But I do have to talk about stop. These are by far the coolest people you ever want to meet. They do it all. I should have known when I heard about how they would ride on summer nights on a motorcycle at 150 miles an hour. And Renee was on the back of the motorcycle, and this was fun for them. Well, keep going. There they go. Look at them. They are so smooth. Keep going. Look at the cool family that they were able to have. Keep going. Respectable sons. Felicia, she's sitting next to me. Keep going. Look at the family that she was able to produce. Greg and Sahira Long. Stop. Take that back. Were they brothers and sisters? Greg, did you have the same outfit that she had on?
And I want to know how sad she got into the picture.
Yeah. All right, let's just keep going. Respectable, she's a doctor. Let's just keep going. Look at the two respectable kids. How Greg can have a handsome child, I don't know. Listen, Ashley Montgomery. He is one of the elders here, and sure enough, there's Daryl and Lisa. They're sitting right next to us. I don't know, what were you thinking about that day, Lisa? Huh? Who knows? Okay.
I say this, I have a card that I bought, but I haven't given it to Lisa because the envelope got crumpled all up in my purse. But the card says, there are lots of stories about friendships, but our story is the best. And the way I met Lisa was that we was at a church picnic for my previous church, and all the girls in the church, light-skinned people get a little hated on, So all the people and all the ladies in the church were standing on the side talking about somebody. I showed up, and I said, well, what are they talking about? I just kind of stood there and ear hustled a bit. And I heard them talking about a person. I saw her standing over there watching Daryl play volleyball. And I just went over there and started talking to her. Deron started talking to her. And from that point on, that's how we became friends. She was standing, we became friends. And I still don't know how I became her children's godmother. I don't even know how it went from there. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of great stories about friendship, but we have the best one.
Amen. Let's keep going. I ain't say nothing about Daryl. Look at the beautiful, they had beautiful sisters, Janice, Sexton. Where are those two kids at?
Right there.
There they go. I love that. The little girl, I can't think of her name. What is the little girl's daughter's name?
The youngest one?
Yeah, I can't think of her name. But they can't tell me. Cabby, who's sitting up here with her two sons who we thought were going straight to hell.
To jail.
And jail. Joe and Asia, the go-go crew. They still dance. And he had a beautiful family as well. And who else we have? Rob and Tony. I can't get past Rob. Look at Rob West,
Rob
y'all.
don't look no old. He just got a gray beard.
Rob is, what's that? Benjamin Button. Him and Rivian are Benjamin
I'm
Button.
mad at them.
They don't ever get older.
I'm about to put them to sleep and draw some blood.
Look how good they look. Well, they're presenting in ATL, and that's their family. Everybody say family matters.
Family matters.
And so we just wanted to show you that we were all people, and we still are people. And today we want to just get into what we have to deal with as people raising little people who are trying to kill us, whose goal is to rack our life with so much interruption that we say, hey, I ain't signed up for all this, but you got to love them anyway. Anybody understanding that? We want to talk about the issues that we face in our families. I like to do just a little review, and I'm going to ask questions. I told them we're going to flow a little differently this evening. We talked about anger in the family, and we began to talk about family meetings. The question I want to ask is, how did the family meeting help the anger in the family? How did the family meeting help? If you had family meetings, how did it help the anger in the family?
That's for those who
That's up
actually had
here.
meetings.
Those who had family meetings.
Well, I'll share. We had not consistent meetings, but we had meetings. And most of the time they were crisis meetings, let me say that.
They were what?
Crisis meetings.
Uh-huh.
So when we would get together, I would open the floor. First we would pray, open the floor to the boys. And most of the time we were dealing with an issue between the two of them because they fought a whole lot. So what I did, I would open the door for them to share. And because Deborah was a better talker, he would over-talk Deborah. I said, wait a minute, David, you have to wait a minute, let him talk. And then he would say, Mom, well, you too. So they was addressing my anger because sometimes I was the one instigating some of the chaos in the home because of my anger and my aggression. And from that, because David, he would internalize things and Deborah was outward, it was causing friction between them. So they took it on each other for what I was doing. So doing this.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
What is what I was doing?
Yeah, I was a very aggressive parent. I learned that from growing up. You do as I say, not as I do. And my word was the last word. So at this point, I was right on the fact that their father was in the house. But it was 5 years after the fact. So it wasn't the absent parent who was causing the problems. It was the present parent, which was myself. And I learned to really, with boys, because I learned this growing up, be aggressive with them. If you're not aggressive, you don't holler and tell them what's up, they're not going to listen to you. Well, it didn't work because David would just become more passive aggressive. He wouldn't do a thing that I said, nothing. And he took that to school. Deborah, on the other hand, if I'm hollering, okay, he hollered, but when he got to school, he was hollering and fighting the teachers. So, but I found out a lot of the anger that I had was from my own past. When I was young, I was molested a couple times, and I was divorced. And the divorce, I didn't want the divorce, but how it came up, he had done some things, it backlashed on us, so we were actually running for our lives at certain points in time. And I had to run, and we were homeless because of that. So all that pent-up aggression and that pain that I had, which was still inside because I didn't know how to express it except, hey, get it in order. And I should say this. Most of the time I was angry and hollering at my kids because I didn't want them to turn out like me and their father. So I was fussing and hollering in fear to keep them in check, which means more comfort for me and one more less thing I got to worry about. So in the meetings, when they were going back and forth and arguing, things were exposed. It was painful to me, but the exposure was a time for them to heal. That's why I said it was mostly crisis meetings, because as a single parent, although I wanted to be fully engaged, most of the time I didn't have the time, and I was being honest about that. But when it did happen, this is how we process things out. And from those family meetings, especially one in particular, they was fighting. We came from church one night, and David said something to Deborah, and they was fighting in the parking lot. I mean, they was on the ground, rough, rolling, and I said, "My God, why have you forsaken me with these kids?" And that was around the time Jill was doing the parenting class, and she said something in the class, and I said, "Jill, why are they fighting like this?" Because I have no clue. I really had no clue. And she was explaining some things to me about boys and aggression, where they were angry with each other for some things that had taken place in their past. And at this point, I said, "Well, God, I've done all I can do with them." The meeting was the place to say it, but meetings are only exposure. They're not always solution, because when you find out something that's taking place, and nothing you can do about it. And this is around the time I learned to fast. I started fasting, praying for them, and I took them to therapy. Those meetings, the crisis meetings, it was out of my hands at one point because there was nothing I could do to help them. And I wasn't a man, so I had to bring some mentors into their space, to Ron, a couple other brothers helping them. We went to family, we went to therapy together. They got to say what they had to say. I'm crying, Deborah fussing, David crying.
Stop. Let's just slow it down a bit. You, an African American mother, went to therapy
Yes, sir.
by yourself.
By myself, and then with my sons.
How did that help?
That helped tremendously because they had a safer space to share. See, when you're a single parent, I can be the nurturer, and I wish I was in the position of Taya, where I was in, somebody check me. But when you're a single parent, there's nobody there. You're it. So if you snapping and going off, there's no one to tell you stop snapping and going off. And kids are not going to tell you that, because you're their comfort, you're their love, they're their all. You give me money, food, clothing. So I can't go off on you. I got to have some way to do it. And they did that in school and going off. But when, and fighting the police, and that was him. But in therapy, they were having a safe space, and I brought them there for them to share what was going on with them. And it got so great, God is so good. Their daddy, they were out of their space for a period of time, and I was praying, and I called him one day, and I said, "The kids are going through some things. Can you go to therapy with them?" Now, we had been divorced at this point, so he went to therapy with them. Now, their session was a little bit longer than mine, because they had some deep stuff talking about, which I don't know about to this day, because it wasn't my business. But they went to therapy together, and so it was just a blessing. The meeting sparked some triggers for us that exposed some things for God to heal. But up until that time, they were just fussing and fighting.
Great story.
The right timing. And we thank you for sharing. They walked in. Y'all go to the microphone. How did the therapy help you all? Now, don't be
These are
taken.
Cabby's two sons.
These are Cabby's sons. Don't be taken aback by their appearance today.
Yeah, and they're single, but go ahead up there.
There you go. How did therapy, and let me explain to you all. I told Cabby, I said, "You are an anomaly. You are one of the only black women that I have seen decide to go to therapy with their child to confront some issues and bring harmony to your family." And it was rough, but I'll stop there. Go ahead, my friend.
I know the biggest thing for the family meetings that we did was the consistency of it. As we continue to have them, I probably was the...
Devereaux, please stand closer to his side.
I probably was the...
Perfect.
I was probably more the one who didn't really care for it. I just thought it was stupid at first. I was just like, "This is some white people stuff, man. I ain't got time for this." So, but as we kept going, pointing to the fact that what she was talking about the last time we were fighting, that the solution to us finally coming to agreement and everything was because I was the one that brought us together for that. But this is because I learned from doing it with her so many times, because I knew there was something going on with me and Devereaux. I just couldn't figure it out. We were getting older, so now fights used to be just wrestle and tussle as children, but as you get older, you're now with the inner strength to kill each other. And that's to the point of where we were getting. We were older, and he can fight. So it was getting out of hand. So I say, but the biggest thing about it, I say it was consistency. And now as we got older, we knew how to come together for not just crisis. We knew how to come together when me and him had something to do, or maybe we're trying to work out something that's subtle, like transportation or something, trying to share costs or taking care of my mother. So I think the biggest thing about family meetings was not trying to come up with something to prepare to talk about every time. It was just being consistent with it, sitting and listening, and then really observing who each other was and saying what I did in the meeting. Then when she talks, she says what she did. Devereaux says what he did. I'm not saying, well, Devereaux did this, David did that. And once we got to the point of talking about just ourselves, then that's when it turned around.
Thank you for sharing, brother. Thank you for sharing.
Y'all didn't see the tap
They
on
do
the
this
butt,
all
but
the
go
time.
ahead.
Now, I do know, and it's actually interesting, I did not expect to walk in at that time when Mama talking about the police. But what tied back to that is the hurt. You know, I always had a voice. I always been very aggressive. But at that time, my voice was being oppressed by so many different people. Only way I knew how to communicate was with these. So that's why I was fighting a lot. But when I was able to go into therapy, at first I thought, like my brother said, y'all crazy. What this woman or this man gonna tell me about myself? They don't know me. But it was the key to breaking the stronghold that I had was I just need somebody to listen. They took the time to listen to me, say, okay, what are you experiencing? And that's all I ever wanted. So by the time when my dad come in the room, I'm a little bit more mature. I'm glad that ain't how it started, because if he came in the room at the beginning, it would have been a situation. But as I grew up, I was able
Are
to...
you telling me that your father, that y'all were no longer,
My
that
dad,
she's
yep.
divorced from? All y'all went to therapy?
Pops came into therapy. And
Y'all watching a miracle here.
and from that, it not only healed us, it healed a part of my dad too. And to come to find out, he experienced the exact same thing that we did when he was that age. So he's now crying and saying, oh, this is what happened. And now we're able to understand each other. A person who I didn't know my whole life. My brother knew my dad a lot better than I did. I didn't know him. So I hated him, you know.
Amen. Let's wrap it
There
up.
it is. So that's how we developed, grew up. And then the therapy, like I said, it was extracting something that I wasn't looking for or searching for. But it was there for healing, and God sent us in that space to do so.
Amen. We want to get into social media. And Rivian put me on this page a few years back when he said, you almost have no choice. And he said, this is what we're having to do. What is the issue with social media as you see it today? And I'd like to take the moment to have this conversation begin in ATL.
Hi, this is Sheldon, Sheldon Sexton in Atlanta. I have, I guess I can say, I had the privilege of dealing with some of the teenage boys. I coach basketball, and right around the time where social media had, started to ramp up, I was a mentor of young soldiers. I think the problem with social media as it relates to our family is, one, it's socially acceptable. It's actually socially the norm. So, for these kids, they don't know that we didn't have social media, cell phones, and all that stuff, prior to. So again, for them, that's all they know. And the issue I think that we deal with social media is everybody has a voice in ways that, in most ways, in 70% of the ways, it's people that are just looking for attention. They have a voice and a platform to say whatever it is that they deem is important, and in a lot of ways, it's not. for these kids and how it gets to our family is, again, these kids are saying different things. You have people that are following them. For some of, if you're raising a family and you're not constantly in tune with what's going on with your kids, this stuff is getting into. Some of the most foolish and demonic things they're receiving, and if you don't check in, it's going to get a hold of them. And so again, with this social media, I think the biggest thing is it's at their fingertips. They literally, if you have a kid that has a cell phone, they have access to all of these different things. They have access to, just for instance, me and Larry were talking about Rick Ross that was, in the hospital. Well, there was a Facebook post that said that this man is dead. He's not dead, but somebody took the liberty upon themselves to go ahead and post these things. So a lot of these things on social media, on the internet, are not checked. They're not regulated. And again, it gets into your family because I have, a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. Well, my 9-year-old is getting to the point where her friends have cell phones, and so that's the big thing. Daddy, can I have a cell phone? Daddy, well, such and such has a cell phone, and again, for her being 9, that's just not acceptable. But as I deal with it on a regular basis with some of the teenagers, I mean, again, it's rampant. These kids are in school, they're fighting, they're taking, videos of fights, they're taking videos of all types of different acts that are going on in school that are not permitted. I mean, again, you're talking about sexual acts, you're talking about, the range goes from bottom to the top. And so again, in regards to your family, you have to be very mindful of what's going on, what pages, what social media that they're on, to be able to monitor these things. I mean, monitor who are they friends with, who are they following? Because again, these demonic activities have access and a pathway into your house the way that they never did when I was a kid.
Yeah, this is Riv. I wanted to jump in there. A couple of things. When Deron first asked me about this whole social media thing, and I do want to touch on a couple of things Sheldon mentioned, and that is, Renee and I were trying to figure out how to deal with a thing that is here to stay. Social media isn't going anywhere. Cell phones aren't going anywhere. As the world progresses, any and everything is moving toward, this device called a cell phone, which is really not a cell phone as we knew cell phones to be, for those of us who remember when cell phones first transitioned from beepers or pagers to a cell phone. You had a phone in a bag. You had a phone, we called them bricks. Those were actual cell phones. The only thing you could do was make a phone call. These things are computers. They're credit cards. You can do everything from investments to look up real estate property to, their maps. You can find your way to your next destination. So these are beyond cell phones at this point. So we were trying to figure out as parents, one of the things that Sheldon just spoke of, for many of us that sit on this panel and, and even as parents in the audience, if we were to stumble upon something that was, taboo, or if we were, let's say, pornography, we had to stumble upon pornography. You had to be searching for, like in my case, I'm looking for candy, because your parents used to stash stuff when they didn't want you to eat it all up. But, then you stumble upon a video. You stumble upon a magazine. Whereas, as Sheldon said, now these things are at their fingertips. If you Google the wrong word, or sometimes you can just type in, like Rob, Wes, and I were talking yesterday. You type in, well, I don't really want to say it, 'cause I don't know if there are any kids in the audience in Maryland. We don't have any here. Well, one of the things we realized, Renee and I, we couldn't demonize. You can't demonize social media because it's not so much the social media platforms that are bad. It's us as the users that choose to do bad things with them. And so we had to find out or figure out a way on how we were going to allow something that was not going to leave our space, isn't going to leave our space, but how are we going to cope with those? And so we had to come up with rules in the house. We talked yesterday, again in the session yesterday, about age-appropriate discipline. I heard Sheldon say, now is not the time for your child to have a cell phone.
You said you came up with different rules on how you were going to deal with that. What was that process? What did that look like?
I know one of the biggest rules is that we had to have access to their social media. We had to have passwords or following them or we told them in order for you to have it, we had to have all access to it. So I had to see what you were posting, what your responses were to post. But even in that, it was somewhat difficult because social media is a thing that's constantly evolving, changing, adding. So when, let's say, I think they first got phones when they were in middle school, maybe 7th, 8th grade. They had cell phones. And so you may start off with a Facebook, but then once kids realized that parents were on Facebook, then they transitioned to something else. So now it's, I'm just going to throw Instagram out there. And then from Instagram, now it becomes Snapchat. And then from Snapchat is something different. And so it's very difficult to try to keep a grasp of all of what was going on. I mean, because there were even things that I had never heard of, whereas one time there was this thing called Kick. And so I'm like, what is Kick? And I think conversations with each other, conversations with other parents, we were fortunate, especially coming here from Maryland and leaving all of our rooted foundational relationships and having to come here and start over. We were very fortunate to have a village here with both of our kids that had parents that were very involved with their children, and we communicated a lot with each other. And so we were like the police in a sense, where it was like we would follow each other's kids and say, hey, I'm not going to say what I saw, but you might want to go look at your child's this page, Twitter page, or you might want to go look at this. And then that way we'd be like, okay, cool. And we'd see things and we'd have a conversation. So to answer your question, one of the first and foremost rules is that we had to have access to your social media. And then if we saw something that we didn't feel was appropriate, then it was like, you need to take that down. And then we would have a conversation as to why it needed to come down. And allow them to express what they felt was right or what wasn't wrong with it. But then we would also come back to say, but here's what you have to consider. For those who don't know, our oldest son, Rivian, he was being recruited for football. And we had to, even in high school, say to him, you have to be careful what you post because these coaches are not just looking at you on the field. They're looking at you as a person, character. What you're posting is a representation of who you are as a person. So we had a very good friend who was the vice president of communications for the Falcons here in Atlanta, and he would share, just how important it is that our kids would keep their social medias clean, because gone was the day of, you'd have a one-on-one interview and a person sit down and talk to you and find out who you were as a person. No, now all they do is say, well, what's your Facebook? And literally when we would be applying for different schools, or like when he was being recruited, they had these prospect forms that he had to fill out. Well, these prospect forms ask, what's your Twitter handle? What's your Instagram? What's your Facebook? And which also it reiterated what we were trying to teach them at the time, which is people are going to go to your social media to see who you are. They're not going to sit down at a table and ask you a bunch of questions. So it's very important of what you post. So those were the biggest things, that we had to have access, and that if we saw things that we didn't agree with or we felt that wasn't appropriate, then, it needed to come off. But it's difficult. I mean, it's very difficult because we were laughing yesterday because we called Ryan Device Man. And the reason we would call Ryan Device Man is because we would take real quick, we would take Ryan's phone, but Ryan would have phones under his bed. He would have stuff that he felt like a friend may have given him. And so we thinking we're doing something by taking his phone, but he had devices stashed everywhere. So, we had to say, although we thought we were controlling something, keep going, okay. Although we thought we were controlling something, we really had to recognize that there was, what we thought we had control, we really didn't, in a sense, because he was able to, we take your cell phone, but then, with these cell phones, as long as you have Wi-Fi access, you can still you don't need actual cellular service. You can still access the internet. So we think, okay, well, we're going to take your phone, but he got found one of his father's old phones and tapped into Wi-Fi, and he's still like, hey, you can take my phone, I don't care. And so they would get real slick with it, but you have to constantly stay on top of these things.
Right, and so, and with that happening, use this. Turn that way. Okay, and so in that being the case, again, I guess it's like you're trying to out-slick each other, so to speak. So we realize at this point, the only thing we can do is educate. The only thing you can do is educate at this point, and that is get them in an environment that is not mom and dad. There's a scripture that says a prophet is without honor in his own town. And so in us being the parents, many times you need someone that is their peers, someone that they look up to, someone that they respect to say sometimes the very same thing that you say, for them to end up getting it. So in that, we were big proponents of making sure that they were educated, or at least and had an awareness of the effects of this. And if they chose after that point to make the decision, then that decision is squarely on their shoulders. And then at that point, whatever that consequence is for that, then that's going to be their consequence. And so, as she mentioned, we had a friend who worked for the Falcons, and he, we set up where he spoke. Actually, he spoke to Ryan's basketball team. They had a conversation about social media. And then he had the guy come in from player personnel for the Falcons, who this is his job, to follow these guys and to track what it is that they're doing and give them the ramifications of what this looks like. And they spoke one time about, and I don't want to get too much into football, but they spoke one time about a guy who they were recruiting him for the Falcons. And these guys about to be a multimillionaire, and they were asking him about, how do you feel about guns? And, so of course this guy said, well, nah, I don't like guns. And then they slid him a picture that says, well, isn't this you with these guns draped, with these bullets draped around your neck and these guns on the table? Well, needless to say, he didn't get that job. So these are the, and so we had to show these are the consequences of this. Well, you asked also, what are some things that we did? We signed contracts. We had them. I wish I would have brought them. I ran across them the other day, unpacking, but contracts that we had them sign that say, here's what's going to happen with your phone. If these particular things happen, one, being when you come in the house for homework, we had a box right by the door. When you come through the door, these cell phones need to be put here on the table. So, of course, they would, attempt to not put them on the table. So you had to deal with that. I see the sign. So We had to deal with that. We had contracts. We had to take these phones, for a certain length and period of time. And then we even had them sit down with the DA, a prosecutor, who end up explaining to her and explaining to them the importance of, if you receive a picture, and as a kid, if you receive a nude picture, be it one of your classmates, is an incident just happened here in Atlanta a few days ago at one of the high schools, and where they found some students who were having sex in the hallway, and it was recorded. Well, if you as a student now forward that to another student, and that student tells you to, or if Ryan, let's say Ryan comes home and he says, Mom, Dad, here's, somebody sent me this is what happened. He can now be implemented as sharing child pornography. And so as a prosecutor, this prosecutor is saying, we see this all the time where these kids are passing this information around because they just think, hey, this is just what look at this, look at that. And then they find themselves in court being charged with child pornography because their minds are not telling them. There's a disconnect between what's reality and what's just inside of this little square box. And what they deem is something that is just, another Instagram post, another text message or tweet. And these things have major consequences when they now do this. And they said in that case, and so if there are any kids or parents out there, if your kids run across that, what they advise you to do is if your child receives something, delete it and then tell you about it, for them not to show you. So, or even if they say, Mom, this little girl, this, that, and that, don't look at it. Tell them, hey, I don't want to see it, delete it, and we'll deal with it. We'll talk to the school and that sort of thing, because there's all sorts of stuff that's going on.
For us, because we weren't on social media, we had to learn what all of these different things are, which means we had to get educated ourselves on what applications do they have access to, what different platforms do they have, what can this one do versus that one. So we had to become the student. We had to get our daughter to tell us, basically, what are you going to use this for? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? Then we had to do our own research to find out what are other people using these things for? How is this going to affect our child, and what should we do? And with me being a techie guy, I want to know how I can prevent her from going to certain places. How can I put something on the phone that she doesn't know about that I can monitor what she's doing without her knowing? So we did, just like Riv and Renee, we did the passwords. We gave her certain access. We gave her limited access. We gave her times when she could access. What else did we do? We only let her have certain social media apps that she could go to with our presence. We did spot checks, surprise spot checks, where, okay, let me see your phone. What have you been posting lately? We put, and I even have it now, I have her Instagram account on my phone, so whenever she posts something, I can see what it is. Now, she may be able to add different accounts, but for what I know, this is what she's been posting. Like Riv and Renee, when something got posted that we didn't approve of, we also had a conversation with her, told her, hey, this is not cool. Take this down, and here's why. This is what this looks like to an adult. This is what it's going to look like to your future. Our daughter is trying to be a professional ballerina. Okay, I see the sign. So basically, in a nutshell, we had to get involved. We had to seriously get involved and make a committed effort to know what our child is doing at all times.
I need to ask you, is that fair to go into their phone and put apps on their phone? Is that fair? What about their privacy and their rights. Is that fair? I just want to get something started.
Yes, it's completely fair. And no, seriously, it is fair. As a parent, one of the agreements that we had was, in order for you to have access to this, here's what we will allow, and here's how it's going to go. No different than what Riv and Renee said. They had contracts. They had different things. We did a honor system, if you will. If you're going to have access to this, we're going to have access to this. The only way you can join your friends in having access to this app is to let us have access to the app. So the argument was, well, my friends may post stuff. Are you going to hold me accountable for the things they post, even if I don't post them? I said, we can only deal with what we can deal with. We can't control what other people's parents let them post or what gets sent to you. But as for you, this is what we're going to do. We also, instead of beating it into her that, hey, don't do this, we focused on trust. We need to be able to trust you. If you're going to do these apps and do these different things, we have to be able to trust you. And we focused on trust so much that it's in her to know, I don't want to disappoint my parents. I don't want to have them not trust me. So I want to be on top of this, because if I do this right, and here's where the selfish nature comes in for her, if I do this right, I'll get access to more things and I can continue on to be a part of it. And I get to keep the trust of my parents, and I don't get myself in trouble. Did you have something to add?
Well, hi, I'm Tony. And this whole social media thing dealing with our daughter is difficult. It's really hard, and sometimes I feel like I just want to turn it over to Rob, because I don't want to have to deal with the energy that's going to come up in me when I have to go and say, hey, what is this? Or when I have to go and say, what are you looking at? You know, it's just a lot. So I have to be in partnership with him and like-minded with one mind to talk with her and show her, you know, basically just to teach her what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Sometimes I feel like I just want to just, you know, you just deal with it, because I don't want to have to deal with the energy of her, you know, just the back and forth of her trying to prove her point or make her point. But I realized that I have to work with him. You know, first is us two together first, and then we can deal with her.
Thank God for fathers. That's why we are considered the bad guys. We got to do what we got to do.
I appreciate you sharing that, Rob. Let's bring it over here. Social media successes, failures, transparency. What were the rules, or did you have rules in your house, or did anything go? Whoever wants to talk, I know all your stories.
It's Cabby. I remember the season where the Facebook thing was coming up, because Ron was teaching a series of lessons during that time in church about Facebook. I had no idea what it was. I didn't have a Facebook account. Still don't have one. And then one Wednesday, Jill, we had Women's Wednesday, and she was talking about Facebook. Evidently, some people in the church was posting things, and, you know, it was just chaotic. And the incident, and at that point, I saw that it was an impossibility to keep them from social media. It was just, you know, it was a losing fight. So I went home and I wrote a lesson, and I called it a final word to my sons. I put David's name at the top, Daryl's name at the top. And I put what I saw was the vision for their lives from their actions. I saw what they could become, and these were some of the things they were already carrying out. David was already like a businessman. He was in the FBLA at the school. He was growing. He was a good artist. He could play by ear. He was artistic. Deborah, on the other hand, was a leader. He was moving and shaking in school. So I put the vision up there with them. I put their strengths and weaknesses. And then we called a meeting together, and I started talking to them. I said, listen, this social media thing, and at that point, I was also praying that they would be God-fearing. That meant that when they left the house, they could govern themselves outside of my care. So I knew at this point, because Deborah was about 14, 15, Dave was maybe 19, rules at this point because it's not going to work. So I said to them, I said, listen, this social media thing that's going on, what you do from here with it, if you want this vision to come to pass in your life, if you're going to do something with your life one day and you're going to be somebody, and I knew that they would because I had seen it, this choice has to be yours. And what you don't want to do is at a point in your life when you're growing and you're moving and you're shaking and you're doing things, this thing backlashes on you because you done went and posted something on your Facebook. It's going to have ramifications on you. So the choice right here is yours. And I called it final words to my sons because I knew I was shifting from being a parent with the 1, 2s, and 3s and telling them what to do, and I was coaching, beginning to coach at that point. And coaching meant that the truths that they had learned at a certain point, they had to start pulling them up and practicing them outside of the house. And I had that conversation with them about that, and I said, well, what are you going to do with this? Because I'm not going to chase you around and looking for things. I don't have the energy for it. And again, like I said, I'm a single parent. That's not the excuse. But I knew this was an impossibility. And so from there, I would hear the stories. They said, Mom, you know what happened to my friend's Facebook? They was coming home telling me the stories and stuff, but they did not have an account with it. So they kind of separated themselves from that based on what they wanted to become in the world. And it was a great thing because at that point, they was teaching their friends. You don't need Facebook, man. What are you doing, social media? And not to demonize it, but it was just a reality. But that was the choice they had to make. And I thank God that he gave me the wisdom to show them that this was a choice for your life. This is not me. I cannot do it. Now, at that point, Deborah he was about 14. He didn't have a cell phone. But nevertheless, that was how we dealt with the social media piece in our home.
Thank you for sharing. Lisa, the mother of the triplets.
Okay, for us, the girls got a phone when they were like 13 or 14. They had got
Hold the
new
mic
phones.
up. Hold the mic up. Go ahead.
They got new phones. And I was in my room, and they were in their room, and they had already set them up. Well, an app had come on their phone of social media. So I was just in my room, and I was thinking about it. So I went in their room, and I just said, y'all have social media? And they said, yeah. So a few minutes later, Jordan said, Mom, look at this. Somebody had instant messaged her and asked her, was she a model? She got afraid. So we went downstairs, we had a family meeting, and Daryl was able to explain the security measures of just what happens with social media and what can happen to you. And so they all sat there and deleted them because it was frightening for someone just to contact her that she didn't know to say, do you model? That was one thing. The other thing, we kept their phones in our room at night. Everyone plugged up their phones in our room. As they got older, it got later, but everyone put their phones up until their senior year. And laptops, everything would just put away.
Wait a minute. Wait. You said that they didn't use their phones to their scene. Now, every family is different. How did y'all come about that?
Well, at night, when it was time to go to bed, we needed their phones in our room. That was a rule, and they followed it.
Wow. Okay.
Why did you put their phones in their room? Why did you do that?
Because of the distraction or the access. They didn't have the access all night. I mean, I would hear all kind of stories. My kids on the phone all night. They're doing this, they're doing that. And so how we prevented it, we all just put our phones together at night in our room. And we did it, and up until their senior year, they did it. After that, at that point, they were able to govern their own selves. And so that was the rule.
Now, all these kids wasn't cooperative. Did anybody have any challenges with social media?
On this side.
On this side. We didn't heard what they went. Anybody?
I'll say, for us, you really do have to know your children, and different children, you have different rules for them. So Eden, who is almost 21, I think she got a cell phone maybe in the 7th or 8th grade when she had to catch the school bus. And she was not a phone person. So she is not calling you back. She's not texting you. She's not doing none of that. Evan, on the other hand, he was so ready for a cell phone. And, I was very much against Evan getting a cell phone. I really was, because I knew how, he just is, we had to put parameters on him with video games, all of those things. So I knew that a cell phone was just another layer that we were going to have to monitor. But like Riviana Renee, he was going through the recruiting process for football, and Ed did get him a cell phone. And and he set up a Twitter account. So one of the things is that Ed had access to the Twitter account. He could look at who his friends were, say, that person, how do you know that person? But also, Evan really struggled with, just trying to manage himself and manage his time. And we could tell that the beast was going to come out when you said, give me that cell phone. That beast was getting ready to come, and it was rearing its ugly head, so much so where we really had to say, like, look, we are going to take this cell phone from you, and you will have nothing. And even probably maybe, and Evan is 18 now, but about a month ago, this is a story. He asked me yesterday, did I say anything about him? And I told him they didn't even know I had children yesterday because I did not talk about them. But Ed said, man, take your cell phone downstairs. Leave it downstairs. Well, Evan took the cell phone downstairs and stayed down there with the cell phone. So technically, he was following the rule. Right. He was following the law of the rule, but not the spirit that Ed had. And so we had to take the cell phone from him to say, man, like this is drawing you in a way that it's taking something from your spirit. And anything that is grabbing you that much, that's got some demonic potential for you. Right? And so we had to have that conversation, and it wasn't a pretty conversation, but he was able to see the benefit in it. And so he would take he was able to then follow the rule. But I'm telling you, you can see, and I have heard of people or children going fist to cuff with their parents when you decide to take that cell phone. So it is all. And let me just say this to you all. I see people with babies putting cell phones in babies' hands to entertain them. You know what I mean? And so from an early age now, people are putting their cell phones. You can see a baby in a stroller with a cell phone in their hand. So we are teaching them to be dependent on this device for entertainment. And so you really do have to make sure that you know who your child is. And in the beginning, you set up the parameters, because the struggle is real, because, just in terms of how we just are zoning out based on cell phones. But I say all that to say, you need some rules and some regulations, and it's a job. It's hard, and you have to continue to fight the battle. We cannot give up.
There was a guy I was talking to after we left the conference, and we were sitting there talking at a friend's house. It was a housewarming, and the guy he was patting his pocket, and he said, "Oh man, thought my phone had rang." But he didn't have his phone. He didn't even have his phone at all. And so I said to him, it's called phantom ringing or phantom vibrating. And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, Google it. It's a real thing, And one of the things that I realized, and I even did it today after we left and we went to get something to eat, and I had everybody at the table. I was like, "Look, get off your cell phones." Well, Renee was in the bathroom when she came back, And then she had gotten on her phone and she had to post something. And then I said, hey, can you put your phone down? I've already asked everybody to put their phones down. But why did I do that? And why was that clip from The Office, why did that always stand out to me? Because one of the things that I realized was happening with my children was that there's an addiction or there's a conditioning that we have with these cell phones. Or let me say it this way first. There's a conditioning that has now become an addiction with these cell phones. And so to the point where you're hearing them ring or vibrate or feeling them vibrate when you don't have them, or you can be in a restaurant or a movie or you can be watching a TV show and the phone rings or vibrates on the TV show, and then you're now looking for your phone because we have been conditioned. And what did I see? Why was that becoming a problem for my kids? Is because, like everybody up here said about these cell phones, and again, we can't demonize them, but if we are called to raise our children in a way that they should go, and when they grow old, they should not grow apart, then we have to, as Taya said, protect them even in this area, because it does become a distraction. It is social media is not social. And what I mean by that is these kids don't know how to communicate with each other. One of the other advantages that we had with having these guys come in and talk to these boys about social media, and even with the young lady who's the prosecutor come in and talk to these boys about social media, is that they also were talking about interviewing. That these kids don't know how to interview because they don't know how to speak. How they come into interviews and they bring people with them to an interview because they're disconnected from what we have learned. And I think that we, having been a part of a different generation, because you can't blame them. Like somebody on the panel said, these kids are being raised with these. I think Ty may have said, with these kids are being raised with these things. It's a part of their culture. It is who they are. It's what they know. We have an advantage, and this is one of the things that Duran and I and a couple other brothers on the phone, I think Joe was on the phone that day, Ed may have been on the phone that day, and I said we cannot demonize, this is their culture. We can't demonize cell phone. We just have to figure out how this thing is going to coexist in a world that is one way for them, but we're at an advantage because we get to see another viewpoint. We went outside and played. We had interactions with our friends. We had friends who we fought today, and the next day we're back best friends. I'm talking about physically fight. But then you're back best friends because we had to learn to work it out, talk it out, figure it out, where these kids don't have that. And I think somebody said it earlier, I think Sheldon, where they're airing their opinions online, on social media. And I believe that it's our job to say, no, there's another side to life. I can't tell you how many times I'm telling my boys when we're riding down the road on a vacation, or especially, again, when they talk about the recruiting process, that recruiting process had us all over this southeast coast, parts of Central America, United States, Central Time Zone, I should say. I mean, we were everywhere. And I'm saying how beautiful this world is, but a lot of times they're missing it because they're looking into their phone, and life is passing them by. Well, I only could say that because I grew up in a time where we had to, you were on a long road trip, you're playing, what was that game with I Spy? I spy with my little eye something that is green and white, and then you looking around trying to figure out, well, what's green and white? Well, that allowed us to be exposed to, oh, you talking about those trees up on the hill, or you talking about this sign, or you talking about these flowers out in the field that are purple and white. So we have a different advantage, and I believe we have a responsibility to our children, again, because we cannot handicap them from social media. And here's what I mean by that. One time Ryan, he broke his, well, not one time he broke his phone, but he broke his phone, and we had just decided, you're not getting another phone. And, well, Ryan was playing basketball, and this particular season, the coach decided, I'm going to communicate with the entire team through GroupMe, which again is another social media, GroupMe on their phone. And so now we're sitting there, and then Ryan's like, hey, we got to go to such and such, or I got to be over here, or I got a game over here. And we're like, man, why are you telling us last minute? And he was like, well, I didn't know about it. What do you mean you didn't know about it? You just left practice. The coach didn't tell you at practice? No. Well, how'd you find out? Well, so-and-so text me on one of those other broken devices that Renee was talking about. It's just, it wasn't at this time that he had his device taken. He just had one that was broke, and we weren't replacing it. So he was like, oh, so-and-so said coach mentioned it yesterday. So I'm saying, well, why weren't you paying attention? And he said, well, he sent it through GroupMe. So then we realized, and wait a minute, this is how they're communicating. This is how the coach is communicating through the entire team. And then Renee became, the following year, Renee became team mom for during his senior year of high school. And that was the same way that she had to communicate with all of the parents. So I'm saying we can't, there's no way we're just going to take this device away from them, but we have to show them and teach them that there are things that you're missing out on called life. There are communication skills. There are certain things that, so aside from all of the negative taboo stuff that we know, we're saying just socially, you need to be able to communicate. Socially, you need to be able to touch and feel somebody. God we're made in a fashion that we're supposed to be in relationship with one another. And that this phone doesn't do this and allow you or allow for that type of interaction. And so as Rob was saying, this is why we have to explain to them, not just punish them, but sit them down and explain to them, as Jill said yesterday, you have to give them a why. Here's why this is important. Here's why this, and have a healthy discussion. And this is where those family meetings will come in and be of great benefit to you, because now you're talking about, as Cabby said, now you're not having a house meeting based on a crisis, but you're now having a house meeting based on one of information, and you're informing them as to why this becomes important.
Father, we thank you for what we've learned so far. May God bless you. This is some serious wisdom that he's dropping in your family. In Jesus' name, amen.